All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Just a quick intro before, on behalf of our Alabama Development Disability Network, we want to welcome each of you to our Partners in Policymaking second session, which is entitled Inclusive Education. And of course, many of you would love to be face-to-face like myself, but of course, the COVID pandemic has taught us how to yield and do things a little bit different. So here we are, virtually. And as we think about inclusive education, many of us know that the Build Back Better plan is heavily investing in inclusive education. So I think this session is fitting and very much on time. So we want to welcome you to our second session. And here we are with State Representative Jeremy Gray. He's better known as in the community as Mr. EYJ for continuous service to elevate his community and those around him. He's an African-American politician, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and a former professional athlete. Representative Gray is currently the Alabama State Representative for the 83rd District, where he serves on the Commerce of Small Business, Health, and Public Safety and Homeland Security Committees. He was voted by his peers in the Minority Whip, and he was appointed to the Alabama State Health Coordinating Council and Innovate Alabama by the Governor Ivey. Representative Gray was recently nominated and selected to join the New Deal, which is developing exceptional American leaders. Witty and innovative at heart, Representative Gray is also the founder of Elevate Your Grind, which is EYG Incorporated, a motivational and clothing brand, as well as the Curtis House, a nonprofit organization which serves a resource hub in one of the most vulnerable neighborhoods in his hometown of Opelika, Alabama. Representative Gray is also a current student at Auburn University with the College of Business, pursuing his executive MBA degree. Representative Gray sponsored legislation this year that would allow yoga into the public schools, provide matching funds for high-risk, high-reward tech startups, attract electronic bike companies into Alabama, make the expungement process easier for those who are seeking a second chance in life, and require schools to provide water stations as well as clean filtered water. Representative Gray is committed to making Alabama a state inclusive for everyone, which is our goal. Representative Gray has received numerous accolades for his community services and leadership, which has made him the young rising star in politics. So when asked what his ultimate goal is in life, he simply stated, to inspire. So I'm excited to have Representative Gray, who's a good friend of mine, know him from previous employment. So we're excited. So we're going to turn it over to Representative Gray at this time. Glad to have you.
Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon. Like you said, I'm Representative Jeremy Gray, and I'm honored to be here today. You know, I believe in relationship building. That's the only way you can actually get things advocated for. And so understanding that and the issues at hand and what you all doing with the partners in policy making in Alabama is so paramount to educate people about, you know, people who have issues with developmental disabilities and their families, right? It's not just with those people that have the condition, it's actually the families, and how do we make everything as far as being as inclusive? I mean, education and life, actually creating a level playing field for everyone. And so I know this is just the kickstart or a jump start to a 2-day virtual event. And so I'm so honored to actually be able to bring greetings to this virtual event. I'll tell you a story about a young lady in Opelika, Alabama, and she has a son named Jay. And Jay, he suffers from seizures and he has epilepsy. And she, you know, she talks about it all the time, but you really don't understand what she's going through on a day-to-day basis. And so one thing that we were able to do for her, where she created it and she was the pilot of it. We did a epilepsy awareness event on November the 7th, where we brought people out. We celebrated, we educated, and it was all really, the premises of it was based off the need of her son. And so just having advocates in the community like this to actually bring these issues forward, because someone like me that deals with so many issues, to me, it may not actually be as important as it is to you. So it's important for you all to bring it to the light for me, so I know it's an issue and I'll be able to advocate for it in Alabama. And so again, I'm just honored to be here. I'll stick around for a little while, but just Mr. Powell, just thank you for always including me in anything you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gray, and we're glad to have you. And I know you have a busy schedule, so we're excited that you were able to join us today. We are excited also to have our first set of presenters who comes to us with a vast amount of knowledge in the area of inclusive education. So we now want to turn this program over to our first set of presenters, Dr. Julie Causton and Dr. Kelly Pretti-Frontczak, to get us started. So we're excited to have you as well. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction. So nice to meet you all. Kristie and I co-teach this work, so we're going to be, it might be a different experience than you're used to, in that it's a very engaging presentation, and we're going to ask you all to find the chat right now and just take a breath, and everybody share one thing you're feeling grateful for right this second. So just start with sharing what, yeah, Daryl, thanks. Life. My husband, yeah, family, good.
And we do this just to take a moment at any given time, individually or collectively, to really take a minute and think about all that's going well. Daryl, I appreciated when you were talking about how we've learned from this kind of trying time, and we're able to come together in ways that we maybe never could have crossed paths before. And so I appreciated how you framed this as an opportunity versus, well, darn it, we can't be in person, we'll just have to drudge our way through Zoom. It's like, what an amazing opportunity to meet people that I never may have been able to cross paths with. So thank you for this opportunity, and thanks for folks for just sharing a bit about what you're grateful for and what's going on in your corner of this globe. And as Julie said, we co-teach this throughout. We use the chat throughout as a way to communicate with each other, for you to communicate with one another. You are always welcome to unmute and share something, but we usually keep ourselves muted just for background noise, and then use the chat in any way that you see fit to continue to think about what you're grateful for, and any questions or ideas you have as we move through our time together.
Yeah, so we just want to say welcome, everyone. And we know that there might be family members here, there might be educators here. We know now that there are politicians here and other leaders in all kinds of ways. And so in a minute, we're going to ask you to introduce yourself in the chat in a certain way. But before we do that, we just want you to double check that you're comfortable. What we mean is, do you have a beverage? Do you have, is the window open just like you like? Actually look around your space and place and get your body really, really comfortable, because we know that learners who are more comfortable learn more. And thanks for sharing all the beautiful things people are grateful for. All right, Kristie, do you want to lead off the chat splash?
All right, so we do this a little bit differently, and it takes a bit of directions because we have to break a habit. The habit when we use the chat is to type something and hit return, and we want you to hold it for a minute. And so there's two reasons we're going to ask you to hold your thought. You can type it and prepare your thoughts, but don't hit return. And there's two reasons we do this. First thing, we're going to ask you something that brings you joy about your family That could be your children, your four-legged friends, and or your school. And that's, again, for those of you at the university, could be that school. For those of you who have a second grader, your homeschool. Be thinking about what brings you joy about your children, about your students, about your school. And you can think of a word or a whole story. And we're going to give you 1 minute to think about it. And you're just going to kind of hold it in your heart and type it in the chat. And then Julie will give you a countdown. She'll say 3, 2, 1, and all of us will share something that brings us joy all at once. And we call it a chat splash. And then we get to look at all the beautiful things that people shared. So for now, you're going to think, hold it in your heart, type it in the chat, but don't hit return until Julie prompts us. So she will give us 1 minute to think about something that brings you joy from your family, your school, your child's teacher, or your families if you are a teacher. Okay. All right, Julie, we're ready.
Okay, go
We're
ahead.
gonna
Start.
Think and type and not hit return.
Don't be sorry, Melissa. It's no problem. Okay. In 10 seconds, you get to all hit return at once. Okay, ready, set, go.
It just entertains us, y'all. So forgive us. And now, if you would like, and if you like to see things in writing, we'll also say a few things verbally. So if you're driving in your car, you're like, oh, I want to know what everybody's writing. Julie will look through and pull out some of the things that folks are sharing about what brings them joy about their family and their schools.
I'm just going to start with Allie's comment. We're close and we spend time together, and my son's teacher sees the good in him. My daughter being settled and safe and happy at school, seeing that she enjoys learning. Melvin said, my child smile. Oh, good. Linda's a grandparent and said, my grandson smile when he sees me. Beautiful.
So the second thing we want to do, because we have a diverse group of folks, and some of you might be listening to this on the replay, and that's cool too. We'll be getting deep into the content here in a few minutes, but as our representative shared, relationships are the active ingredient. And so knowing who we are and what matters to one another is key to doing this work around inclusion. So we would love to know a little bit more about you. This idea of what role you play, certainly you could do that by either renaming yourself in the chat or putting it in the chat. I mean, renaming yourself in the Zoom. You can also just tell us about what struck you about this session that Julie and I are doing when our partners there advertised it. What made you go, oh, this is something I want to make time for, or if you are watching it on demand, think for a second about what you were hoping to get out of our time together. Do you have a question? Do you have something that you are hoping to strengthen? So you might share what role you play, and you might play multiple roles. So that's cool. And what do you come to this gathering hoping you take away?
And just to share with you, we're going to do it in the same exact structure as before. So type it. You have a minute to type and don't hit return. Okay. Minute to type, don't hit return. The last thing is there's no wrong way to do this. So you can say anything you want to us so we can get to know a little bit more about you. Just don't hit return yet. All right, we have about 10 seconds so you can finish up what you were typing. And then on 3, 2, 1, hit enter or return. Woo!
And again, anytime, feel free, you can unmute and share, ask a question, make a comment, tell us more about what's important to you. And then Julie, let's see what we've got, some themes going on here.
Good. I'm just going to start with Veronica's. Policymakers in our state have been well educated about the best practices of implementing inclusive education, and it's still not happening. I'm a school administrator, and I want to know how this would help me, says Debbie. A helicopter mom, learn more about being a circle maker because I grew up with those lines, says Melissa.
Oh, Melissa.
Oh, Melissa, way to go. I'm a mother, wife, advocate, Christian friend, empath, and here today to show up to how I can help those that I love and become the best version of myself, for myself and for those that I love. Beautiful.
Ditto. I don't know. That was so beautiful. I just want to say that's mine. It's not.
Okay, we'll pretend that's yours, Kristie.
Okay.
And then Holly says, DD council staff, parent of a kindergartner. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. Ashley's a college student, want a better advocate. Good. Nice to meet you all. Nice to meet you all. Feel free to scroll so you can see who's here.
And you know, Julie, since so many people said I want to share and I want to give this forward, and maybe what we could do, I put it in later, but maybe we could just show them the dashboard really quickly. That way, if folks have to come and go, they know what they have forever.
Yeah, like Representative Jeremy Gray, you want to see this before, if you're planning to sneak off, you got to see what we got for you. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and Kristie's going to show you this dashboard. Just so you know, this is available for you all to share widely. And what it is, it's a dashboard. You'll know you're in the right place because it says Alabama Partners in Policymaking. And then as Kristie scrolls down, you'll also recognize our mugs. You'll know who it is. It's us. And then as she continues to scroll, this, called Creating Truly Inclusive Schools, Becoming a Circle Maker, is clickable. And when she clicks it, you'll get all of these awesome resources for sharing. Kristie, do you want to just pick one to show what they are so people can see?
I will do, well, let's do this one. We're going to talk about this quite a bit today, Julie. So these are handouts for the most part. Some are articles, some are podcasts, some are blogs. Everything is free, but these are things you can print, share, laminate, give away as a holiday gift. And we're going to talk today about how, yes, we could be educated about what is recommended practice to support any person to have access to education and their environment. But sometimes it's our mindset that needs to be shifted even further. And so we're going to talk about how to move away from a medical lens to an equity lens when we think about disability, and we think about how do we make sure that society isn't creating the barriers that limit people, and how do we look at the strengths, and how do we dismantle systemic ableism, and these sorts of things are what it'll be at the heart. And you might find this to be a useful handout to take back and talk to your colleagues about, are we working from and writing policies and writing laws, quite honestly, that really have this old-fashioned lens, or are we moving towards an equity lens? So that would be the one for me today, Julie. Do you have one that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I want you to go to a definition of inclusion really quickly.
Okay.
So this is, again, it's all for you forever. And so we're going to talk about how we define inclusive education, but it starts with, so if you can see the box on the left-hand side, it says inclusive education means we no longer accept that separate classrooms, separate schools, and separate lives are in the best interest of any student. It's really commonplace to separate children by disability categories, and we are talking about moving far away from that practice. And we actually make a lot of connections because we know that belonging is a human need. So this is an example of a handout that you can take and print and share. Okay.
And then I'll just highlight, Julie, that there's and they come in poster sizes and all kinds of things. And then one of our colleagues has already watched one of our short videos. These are also free. Julie was commissioned to do a 3-part series for PBS on what is inclusion. And so feel free at any time to share each of these. We'll watch some together today as time allows, but you have access to them forever as well.
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
Any questions? Anything in the comments in the chat? Anybody that's already been there, have a question, comment? Anybody who just went there, you'll have it forever. You can share it with anyone. The password is the word inclusion, so it's not a trick, at least for me. All right,
it's not
we're
a trick
good?
for us.
All right.
Yeah.
We just thought that'd be helpful in case anybody has to come and go. Just know that you'll have everything that we're going to talk about right there, and you can reuse it in any way that serves you.
So for our time together, we're going to have some guidelines that we really think are important. We're going to ask you to engage and participate in your preferred ways. So you might be someone who wants to listen the whole time and just listen. Fabulous. We want you to think about your own body positioning and getting really comfortable. Kristie, you pick from the bottom half. What do you think? What's striking you today?
Let's just do relax and have fun today, Julie, because, you know, some of these Zoom meetings can sometimes be a little bit like, you know, and this is just an opportunity to kind of like catch our breath and talk to each other and learn with each other and, you know, actually have a little bit of fun.
Yeah. And Linda said, thank you for the present. I love that you thought it was like a present because that's how I feel. I'm like Oprah and you get a dashboard and you get a dashboard. So I feel like you really understood the spirit in which we intended that dashboard to be. Okay, so relax and have fun. I'm going to ask the group though, take a look at these items. What for you feels important? For Kristie, it's relax and have fun. For me, it's get comfortable today. What for you really speaks to you? And you don't have to type it all up.
Bullets or get a key phrase.
Welcome, Daryl. I love this group.
I do like getting comfy.
Veronica's like, what was, oh, Veronica, thank you. Here's the question. Pick one of these bulleted items that speak to you today.
So if you think of yourself as a learner, which one would be important? To get comfortable, to have a little bit of grace for yourself as we hear about practices that maybe are what we currently do. And we're like, oh, I know I want to move away from that. Instead of engaging in self-criticism, can you have a little bit of grace that we're each on a journey? If you don't get all the answers today, can you be like, got it. This is just another day of the learning. Yeah, Nancy, right.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Allie.
Thanks. Okay. You can also be, what Veronica did, I just want to point out is genius. Anytime you're like, what are we doing? It's probably because we didn't do a really good job of clarifying where we're headed. Always feel free to ask. I just love that you did that. It's really, really lovely. And it helped lots of folks.
Yeah,
oh,
for
good.
Sure. Us included.
Us included. So we're going to ask you to capture your thoughts today. And you can do that by outlining, drawing, or taking screenshots of anything that we talk about. Also, this video will live on your dashboard. So you can also relax and go, I'm going to go back to it and watch it later and take notes, any of those choices. But a quick question, and this one we want specificity. When you take notes or come to a session like this, how do you love to capture ideas? Like for me today, I'm using my spinner pen. I'm someone who has ADHD as an attribute. It keeps me super focused, I would say.
I was like, what's the word? What's the word? Focused? It's like always just.
Not really. Yeah. What's that word? Yeah, I get it. That's funny. Okay. Veronica says screenshots. Kristie, what kind of pen are you using today?
Same one as always, Julie. Someday I'm going to surprise you, Joel, and I'm going to have something different, but I always write with the same pen. It's a Uniball Vision Elite black pen. And I have, only today I have 3 of them by my desk here in case I run out.
Okay, so if Kristie could not find that pen, she would look all over her house for it. And besides my spinny pen, I also have this at the ready. So if anyone can look at my screen, I need a lot of note-taking supplies. And I need
Notice if I
just
said to Julie, hey, Julie, you only get one pen. What have I already done to her enthusiasm for learning? Right? It's like a black pen, only
Veronica,
one?
Veronica's has
limited.
limited her. And even today, if we said to you, everybody, you must take notes using the Uniball Elite, you must write them in the Cornell note-taking method, and you're going to turn them in to us. Nancy's face. What happens to you as a learner? So just share your thoughts. What happens to you as a learner besides it limits you? What else happens to you? Yeah.
Yeah, you can really feel it, right? So you're like, oh, what's a Uniball? Where do I get one? Am I going to fail?
And someone's like, what's Cornell method? I turn it away. I'd say, peace out. Kristie, I'm interested because I was like, these people are awesome. And yet we're creating learners who, Veronica's like, I'd figure my way around it. Yes. But we're creating learners who are already defiant. Right? Already people who are like, I would turn away, crash and burn. This is an example that I want you to think about when it comes to schooling. We care very much that schools are inclusive. And that means the mindset, the heart set, and the skill set. One of the main skills for making schools really inclusive is allowing for choice. If we told everybody here that you have to write your notes in the Cornell notes-taking method, and someone didn't know what it was, or was going to struggle with it, or was going to limit them, it means it's not inclusive.
And it really, we'll talk about this, hopefully. I know time will go fast, but we'll talk about what goes on in the brain. And anybody who felt discouraged, anybody who felt even anxious, like, oh, I don't know, what was it? Where were we supposed to get that? Am I going to be successful? We actually are flooding the brain with the wrong types of information, and the wrong neurons start to fire. And so then we have a lot of kids who are then presenting us with apathy or all the way to aggression. And we're like, where's this coming from? And when we start to scale it back and start to look underneath our practices, the more we've done this restrictive, the more we've done a one way, my way, the more we're actually creating learners who won't have neurons firing and wiring, or the wrong neurons will fire and wire together. And by wrong, I mean the ones that will keep them dysregulated, apathetic, or angry.
Or anxious, Sonia just
or
said.
anxious.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So what we often do, we're going to tell you a little more about who we are, but what we often do, and by often I mean every single day of our lives, is we teach educators how to give directions that always have choice built in, so that you never say, everybody stand up. You say you can stand, sit, or kneel, whatever's comfortable for you right now. As soon as you build in choice, you get a lot less opposition. And then you get, like Kristie's talking about, neurons firing and wiring together. Yes, for our learners who are not privileged communicators. Beautiful, Veronica. Yes, yes. Today is an invitation. So Kristie, explain the invitation today.
So Julie and I have been inspired by Amanda Gorman's poem at the inauguration for quite some time now. It was when she was giving the spoken word poetry live. Both Julie and I text each other at the same moment when she wrote and spoke of this phrase. And so what this phrase does for Julie and I is it sort of sets the context for today's invitation. And what I mean by that is that we're going to ask even the most inclusive one of you, the one that's been studying it the longest, advocating the longest, living a life of inclusion the longest, to even think, how can I think more inclusively? Can I expand it even further today? Again, can I see beauty and creativity in all ways to communicate, from nonverbal to verbal, from marginalized to privileged? But do I start to really see all ways to communicate, all ways to communicate as beautiful things that contribute. And then we're going to use this analogy of creating wider and wider circles. And that'll make sense as we go further. But the idea from Amanda Gorman's poem was that for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, which is beautiful, right? You have to see the hope and the possibility, like Daryl said about us coming together in Zoom. And then the last part is we have to be brave enough to be the light. So it can't always be waiting for my school system, waiting for my superintendent to retire, waiting for this representative. It's a call to each of us to also be brave enough to be the light, whether it's for our own child or our own classroom or our own state. So the invitation is quite broad today. Julie, what would you like to add to the invitation for today?
I don't want to add anything, but I do love what you said, Kristie, about no matter who you are, what role you play, this is for you.
Okay.
And so even if you're a parent and you were just thinking, yeah, I wish my kid's teacher gave choices more because they'd struggle less. I see two jobs for you, or more than that, but I'll start with two. One job is to make sure your educator knows that choice is the friend of inclusion. The other job is to think to yourself, how can I even put more choice? Like, do you want to brush your teeth with a little bit of toothpaste or a lot of toothpaste, right? Brushing your teeth is not the question. You get to pick. So even how do you think about these ideas from every angle? Okay.
And Julie, I'll say for any of you that really want to up your game, the third one would be, is how do you find choice when there doesn't feel like there is a choice? Because you'll hear this all the time when it comes to statewide testing, when it comes to any number of things, we start to get restricted and go, well, yeah, but, and Julie can talk to you about a butt watcher here in a minute, but yeah, but I can't do that because always, always, always ask one another, okay, even if this isn't a choice, is there any part of this activity, this lesson, this experience that can be a choice? And we'll dive into more of that as we go.
We're going to quickly tell you who we are in case you're like, who are these people? We're going to give you a little support and we're going to play this game. And the game is really fun. And we really want to invite everyone to do it. So for example, I'm going to start out, you're going to just make any connections in the chat that you have. So like when I start out, I'm going to say I was born in Minnesota. Now in the chat, you can make any connection you want. You could be like, Prince was from Minnesota. You could be like, I can spell Minnesota. You could be like, never heard of it. You could be like, my grandma's from there. It doesn't matter, but you can make any connection you want to anything we say.
And Julie's going to tell you lots of things about her and you can pick and choose. So you don't have to do something each time, but just as you listen to her story and about her life and about her passions, see where, and you can say, that's me. Or you can say, as Julie said, a little description. I have 2 kids. I have a dog. Anything like that is great.
Okay. So starting out, I am from Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. I went to school in Madison, Wisconsin, and I love Madison, Wisconsin. I now live in New York. So I'm from New York. I live in a place called Manlius, New York. And it's near Syracuse. Now I have to not put keep going in the chat. You're doing great. I have to hide it because I get so excited. I'm like, really? And then it's like, I got to focus. Okay. I have cute children. These are my children, Ella and Sam. Sam, when he was a 2nd grader, he introduced me to his teacher and goes, my mom is a doctor, but she's not the kind that helps people, which is the all-time best introduction I've ever gotten in my life. I have a wife named Ellen. We've been married for now a couple years. I've written lots of books about inclusive education. I would say my passion is all about inclusive education. And I was a professor at Syracuse University for 14 years. And before that, I taught elementary school, middle school, and high school, always as a special ed teacher, always in inclusive settings, always with students with the most significant support needs. And one last thing about me, I said already, but I am a person who has ADHD as an attribute, which probably comes into play when you're working with me in lots of ways, but one of the ways is sometimes I get up and walk somewhere else, and I usually return, right, Kristie, most of the time.
Most of the
And
time.
and I've written a book called The Too Much Unicorn, and that is about what it's like to be too much in every setting you're in. So if you're someone who's considered too much, who's too loud, who moves too much, etc., that might be for you. And I have the most excellent co-teacher, and her name is Dr. Kristie Pretti-Frontczak. So do you want to share about you? And everybody can keep playing with Kristie, because she's going to start out with Ohio, I'm thinking, but I don't know. Idaho, maybe. I don't know where you're going to start.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm
Okay.
always so enthralled by the chat. And I have to say, Nancy, you win with the Land O'Lakes butter, but that I'll let Julie find that. She's going to be like, oh my God.
Oh,
that's
I just see it.
hilarious.
Nancy, Land O'Lakes butter is my favorite food group and food. Okay. All right.
All right, for serious. And for anyone who's listening back and you don't see the chat, Nancy said, I love Land O'Lakes butter. And that was her Minnesota connection. So she gets 2 gold stars for being so clever and funny and entertaining. So thank you, Nancy. So you can keep playing with Julie if you're just now thinking, oh, right, what about New York? Or it took you that long to type. No worries. Or you can switch over and play That's Me with me. I've lived, it's funny that we're in Alabama today, because you usually are part of my story and you didn't even know this. Alabama is one of the last states that I have not yet been to in person. And I only am down to 3. And it is one of the other states that has a lot of vowels in it that I've not lived in. So I've lived in Utah, Idaho, Oregon, and Ohio. And then I always say I'm destined to live in Alabama, but I have not yet been there. So that's my, that's me playing That's Me with you. So I grew up in the West. I started off as an early interventionist. So any of you with young children or who started your journey when your children were very young, that was my role in Oregon. Was to work with young children and their families. I was a home visitor. Then I came to Ohio in like 1997. So the pictures you see of little kids aren't my kids. Those are some of the kids I worked with when I was an early interventionist. And some of those are even from when I was a teacher in Idaho, which was like in 1989 or something like that. But I came to Ohio in 97. I was faculty at Kent State University for 16 years, and I was a professor in early childhood intervention. So I prepared folks to be teachers from birth to grade 3. Like Julie, because we were both academics, we did a lot of writing for many, many decades. All of my books are on inclusion. We talk about it being blended practices in early childhood and about authentic assessment and the power of play. I've been married for a really long time, and we got engaged in 1989. And I've been married since 1991. I'm really checking myself with dates. And we have 1 child. His name is Wizzy, and he's 4-legged puppy who will be 2 later this month. And I think that's a little bit about me. And I'm currently, as I said, in Ohio today.
Okay, this next one, if you are not looking at your screen, it's probably the most important slide we have. And it's that, so look now, it's that we are, Kristie and I, meant to co-teach, and here's proof. We just like any comments that you have about our hair.
Oh, Julie.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, could we not look more like in our high school photos? And I think Kristie on the right looks like Jennifer Grey, does she not? That actress. Big hair, right? Big hair, don't care. That's it. Plus glamour shots. Anyway, this is proof positive that we should be co-teaching together because we're nearly twins. Yeah, Denise, we've all had that hair. I know. Here's our agenda. We've done our opening. We're going to talk about the what, why, and how of inclusion, and we're going to talk about 3 hows of inclusion. And we've got a closing after this. We know, because we do this work all the time, that people are going to say, can you come work in our school systems? The answer is yes. That's what we do all the time. You can just email us. And today is a quick 90 minutes. We often work with school systems for years to get them really understanding how to create inclusive education. So our 90 minutes is a quick snapshot.
We already did the dashboard. I'll just put the link again, just in case you're kind of just warming up. The dashboard is the content hub. That's where everything that Julie and I refer to and or don't have time to cover is yours forever. Some of our top picks and resources to get the conversation either started or going more deeply around creating inclusive education for children pre-K through 12th grade.
Yes, so this dashboard exists for you. This is just a question to see if you were listening. Does anyone know how long you have access to this dashboard? Put it in the chat. This is a quiz. It's a straight up quiz. Kristie always tells me not to quiz people because it really stresses them out. Oh, look at y'all. Yay, you're winning. Okay, good. And if you don't know the answer, just look over the chat. It says forever. You have access forever and ever.
And then sometimes people say, how long's forever, you know, and Julie and I are like, whichever one of us lasts longer. And that's how long. So
right, because yeah, that's right. And so, but I feel really healthy, so I think I'm going to live for a long time.
And I got
Kristie,
my booster shot today, and I'm doing really well, don't you think?
Yes, I do. And I just learned this. My grandmother died at 103. My great grandmother before that, 107 and 105 before that. So I'm just telling you.
So I'm just saying, you're going to have a while.
I'll be here forever.
It'll outlive you all.
Okay, so you saw on the dashboard where this big definition of inclusive education is. We're going to ground ourselves and spend a minute here because it's so important that we understand what we're talking about, at least that you understand what we're talking about when we say inclusive education. And so I'm going to do a read aloud. And you just get to put in the chat the words that strike you or feel interesting to you or important to you. So you get to relax and then put in the chat what words really strike you. Inclusive education means we no longer accept that separate classrooms, separate schools, and separate lives are in the best interest of any student. Separating people by disability disadvantages everyone. Belonging is a human need. Our educational system, practices, and spaces need to be reimagined. Inclusive education means every student is valued because of their strengths, gifts, and even challenges. As disability is simply diversity. I'm going to say that one again. Disability is simply diversity. Everyone benefits from meaningful participation and opportunities to learn grade level content with diverse peers. We must trust that all students come to us as incredible, whole people who do not need to be fixed. Yeah. I'm going to take a minute to let you digest. As Veronica said, I speak like a New Yorker now because I've been in, it's a fast pace. And so I'm just going to give you a full minute to digest that, to read it with your eyes, and to put anything else in the chat that you'd like.
You know, Julie, it's interesting because today, as I was driving, I was thinking about the last part about like, do we call students with disabilities? Do we use identity first language? Do we use person first language? Do we say students with diverse abilities? And it led me to that idea of almost all the labels aren't quite right, because there's this notion behind them of something less than. And I think even in my field of early intervention, which, we're so passionate about intervening early, and even that sometimes comes with this idea of, if we get them soon enough, we can fix what's wrong. I don't think we ever say that out loud, but I think there's some sort of, if enough therapy or enough intervention or enough, whatever you want to call it. And I was just thinking today how sometimes when you say students with significant support needs or things like that, it's closer for me, because it's saying any one of us as a human might need more or less support at any given time. And it's not that we need to fix me. I just need support under these certain circumstances, or until somebody dismantles the barrier that exists. So that's a little free association I was having this morning, but I was even thinking about early intervention as a phrase. Absolutely. And how that can come with this idea that we're fixing something versus supporting early and often.
I mean, absolutely. The word intervention really doesn't sit well with me, for sure, because it's really this medical model, this way of thinking we have to fix so that that human can be, quote unquote, more normal. And I'm just going to look at Dr. Debbie said, separate classrooms, divide students, and speak to which students are normal and those who are not normal. And she follows it up by saying, what even is normal? And I think this work causes us to realize that everybody is normal or nobody is normal, but there is no line, right? We're either all normal or all not normal. And I tend to think we're all not normal, actually. And because really it's just diversity. Diversity in the way we communicate, the way we read, the way we write, the way we walk, the way we move, the way we, doesn't matter, it's diversity. When Kristie and I talk about this definition, we have two parts to it. This was the first part. And then there's the second part, which is pretty text heavy. So Kristie, can you explain this part to folks?
Okay, so this is why when people said, oh, we've got people that are educated about inclusion, but it's not happening, or it's happening in this district, but not in this district, or even this grade, but not that grade. We find really interesting things like preschoolers, no way are they included. And then elementary, yes. And then middle, no, or not until middle school. It's these really interesting combinations of where we find that we are actually inclusive. I'll say one other thing about that, Julie, and then these bullets. Oftentimes, we get a pushback from the deaf community. And I was thinking more about, we were in a school yesterday and some of the teachers of the deaf were very concerned with the harm that might be caused of students who are use American Sign Language or who use other modes to communicate than verbal production, that they prefer or benefit greatly by being in a classroom with other kids who are deaf. And it just struck me, Julie, that it's that mentality that we have to be alike to benefit, instead of how do we all become multilingual, or how do we all learn enough sign language to form friends so that I'm not feeling left out. Because who does, to be honest, want to be, let's say I'm the only speaking student and I'm in a classroom of deaf students, I would feel so left out. I wouldn't know what they're saying about me, what the instruction is. So I get it, but the solution isn't further segregating. So the solution to me is this list. The solution is, how do we redesign systems and structures so that all that diversity is seen versus this is the way we all do it. And if you can't, go over here. How do we really prioritize hiring so that the teacher of the deaf to the paraprofessional, to the superintendent understands this definition of inclusion. How do we eliminate barriers? How do we create welcoming spaces so no matter what my identity is, I'm not marginalized? And I can go on, but I see these all as necessary ingredients to pull off that definition so that we don't go, yeah, it's great, except for if you have autism, then it's too overwhelming and you're better off over here. Well, it's great unless your reading level is so low. We start making these exceptions and versus focusing on this list is how I'm seeing it today.
That's beautiful. So I love, Kristie calls these pieces, the ingredients for real, true inclusion. And I know we've been talking with text up, right? We've been talking with text up. So that means that many of us haven't been able to read the text or see what's there. So I'm just going to give you a full minute and ask people to look at what feels very important to you. So Daryl already started with, I think he said redesigning structures sounded really important to him. And so that's exactly what we want you to do. Share what feels important to you and put it in the chat. I'll be quiet for a full minute. That's 1 minute, and I'm just gonna piggyback. Kristie, you pick one today that feels important. I'm gonna pick,
really good.
A lot of people are saying utilize challenging behaviors, and some people are like, what do you mean? And what that means is school systems that really are inclusive, when they see challenging behavior in any student anywhere, they go, that's stress behavior. My job is to create warm and safe relationships, reduce stressors, soothe systems, and nurture students' well-being. And so every time educators see challenging behavior, instead of saying, I'm gonna start to write that student's name down, I'm gonna call that parent, we just go, oh, here's an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Kristie, what for you is jumping out?
I mean, I have to agree with Melvin and Daryl today too. As partnering with families, I was hoping that through this process of in school, in hybrid, back out of school, in homes, all of that, that we would have really, really learned. And I think many did, that we need to be in partnership with families as we educate. I just think for too long, we've outsourced education. And I would say that's on families as well. Families are like, here's my kid, educate them. Schools are like, we'll take your kid, we'll educate them. And the two of us shall never talk except for a parent-teacher conference where I will, for 5 minutes, tell you something you may or may not know about your child. So I feel like for me, Julie, that's probably one of those, while I love them all, that we can really unleash some magic when we partner with families.
I love what you said, Kristie. And I'm going to just take what Denise said and add to it, which is when we partner with families as educators, we have to be able to see huge dreams for children and not old-fashioned ways of thinking. So old-fashioned ways of thinking are to have really limited beliefs about what's possible for students who have any sort of label at all. And what we believe is, how do we expand the dreams that are possible and help families achieve them, and families help us as educators achieve them. So it's a two-way street, like Kristie said, not a 5-minute conversation or an IEP meeting or anything like that. It's bigger and broader. People had such beautiful things to say in the comments. What we want you to know is it's possible. I love that people are like, all right, listen, in Alabama, we've had this court case and this court case, and where are you stand and how does it work? Beautiful questions. And what we want you to know is for the past 25 years, Kristie and I have each worked in school systems to make them wildly inclusive. And what we find, get ready for this. This is the research you need, but we can share with you the real studies. But if you look at the research, we found that in inclusive schools, children with and without disabilities do better academically, behaviorally, socially. What other measures, Kristie?
I was just going to say, so you said academically, behaviorally, socially, you can even go the domains of development. You can go fine motor, gross motor, adaptive, cognitive, social communication, social. You can go subject area. You can go algebra, physics, biology, welding.
Do elementary, and let's go ages. Kristie, do elementary kids do better or worse in inclusive settings?
Better.
How about middle school kids?
Better.
How about high school students?
High school, better.
Yes.
How about kids who have labels of gifted and talented?
Better. What about kids with emotional behavioral disorders?
Better.
What about kids with Down syndrome?
Way better.
What about kids with autism?
That's
Way better.
Way better.
Way better. Yes, absolutely. So we want you to know it's possible, and we want you to know it's happening all over, and it might not be happening in your places or spaces. And our job today is to help you get tools and tricks and strategies to help make that happen. Oh, look at Kristie. She's like, here's some research. So if you're watching the chat, right there is these are a bunch of research articles that help make the case about why inclusive education is better. All right, Kristie, what does it mean to be a circle maker? Should we talk about this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Oh, can I go back and ask a question? Did anyone notice when we did these two slides, what if you couldn't decode them? You weren't reading on level. Was there an access point? Is there a way that you could access this content in the way that we taught it? Put it in the chat. Is there a way that you could have accessed this content? Good. A lot of people are putting pictures, which is brilliant. And in this case, today, I read it out loud, right? So that's one way people could have accessed this content. I read it out loud. Another way is people put their best ideas over here in the chat in isolated words. That's another way that some people could have gotten what the point is here. And so what we want you to know is everything that we deliver to students, you can just create new access points. So Allie's right, videos are excellent ways for people to learn in new ways. People will talk about pictures as ways for people to learn. What we have for you right now is a video with pictures, but we think it's really cool. And I know Melissa and maybe a couple others have already watched this video. All we want you to do now is watch and get ready to share in the chat what strikes you about this particular video. Okay, what strikes you? You get 5 whole minutes of watching, so get your popcorn if you have it. Yeah, Sonia, also interactive. That's another way that we've made it accessible. Beautiful.
Let me make sure I optimize. Let me do it one more time. Okay.
No worries.
All right, here we go.
Dr. Julie Causton, and I'm here to talk about what is inclusion with a story that I've written called The Circle Makers. Long ago in schools, we tried to draw lines to make distinctions between students. These lines were drawn in thick, dark ink between people. These lines were drawn to mark the differences between them. These lines were supposed to be helpful. They were supposed to help teachers distinguish between those who could go fast and those who needed to go slow. These lines were meant to help teachers teach the right stuff in the right way. These lines made some people feel comfortable and safe. One problem was there were so many lines that we had to put labels on our lines to keep them straight. General education, special education, learning disabilities, emotional disabilities, gifted and talented English language learners, intellectual disabilities, special education rooms, special education hallways, special education schools. Another problem was when we drew these lines, someone was always on one side and someone was always on the other. Someone was always left out. Someone was always given less. Someone was always wanting to be seen or heard or part of. Another problem was that people assumed that students on one side of the line were typical learners, and that typical was real and that average was true, and that anyone who wasn't average had to go somewhere else to learn something else. The problem was people saw disability as something that needed to be fixed, and it needed to be fixed over there in a different room in a separate space. Eventually, these lines created separate boxes or classrooms, a separate system with separate teachers, classes for students who were thought to need separate things. People even started to think that separate lines and boxes were good. Another problem was every person on both sides of any line had different needs. Every person needed to go fast sometimes and slow at other times. Every person was more curious about certain things and bored by other things. Every person had things they were good at and other things they were not good at. So often the lines were blurry. Sometimes people couldn't agree on where to place the lines. Sometimes even the line makers argued about where to place the lines. These lines and these boxes weren't real, but people thought they were. At the same time, we knew that separate was never equal. We knew that humans needed to be together and belong in order to learn and grow. We knew that separation from other people was likely to affect everyone's hearts and minds. So in education, we decided we had to do something. We had to bend some lines and move some lines and erase others. We had to take all the lines and stick them together end to end. It took a lot of time and a lot of work. This now made a brand new long line that we kept bending and bending and bending. The new line connects end to end. This new line is called inclusive education. This new line is a circle. This new circle was very difficult for the original line makers. You see, when they went to school, straight lines existed. Straight lines were important. They grew up thinking some children belong on certain sides of certain lines. And change is hard, especially for line makers. This new circle is called inclusive education, and it means we value everyone. We use this new line to connect, not to separate. Inclusive education means we are curious about how we are alike and how we are different. We challenge and support everyone. We teach to students' individual strengths. We give students choices. We celebrate what is unique about each person, because we learn best with and from those who are different than us. What happened to the line makers? Turns out line makers are the most excellent circle makers. As soon as they saw that these circles created new opportunities for their students and new connections and a sense of belonging, these circles helped students to do better, to learn more, and to make friends. It turns out that students who used to be on one side of the line were excellent teachers of students who used to be on the other side of the line. And the exact opposite was also true. It turns out that it wasn't just good for students on one side of the line, it ended up to be better for all students on every side of any line. But the story does not end with just drawing the circles. Like a circle, this story has no end. It's simply the beginning. Being together inside the circle is the very first step. It's what happens inside the circles where the true magic can be found. To all of you circle makers, let's continue to create wider and wider circles together.
Take a minute, share if you'd like, anything that comes to mind. Yes. Beautiful.
You know, Julie, as we're kind of seeing what folks are drawing from the story, which is certainly about the history of general education, special education in the United States, one of the things I like to think about, even, sorry, Daryl, I keep resonating with your comments. I don't mean to keep calling on you, that all can achieve with support. What I appreciate about that phrase is that we all do need support. And it's not because of a deficit per se, it's because of circumstances. So the way I like to think of this is I like to ask folks, are you a really good driver? Like, how many of you are like, yes, I'm like driving, no problem, got it. And we identify that as a strength. I always pause on that question and I go, well, I can drive fine, but I'd rather not drive. Like if somebody, I'd be Miss Daisy every day of the week in that movie and have somebody drive me, because that's my preference. It's not about that I need support or not. It's just who I am. And then if I say to you, well, are you equally good driving no matter what the size of the vehicle is? Sometimes I see these school bus drivers and I think, oh my gosh, they're amazing. I have no idea how they drive that with all those kids in the lane. And some of you are like, oh, I'm a really good driver, but no, I can't drive a truck or I can't drive a bus. And then I go, well, what about a stick shift versus an automatic? And you're like, oh, well, never mind. I'm not a great driver. Or you're like, yes, no problem. Get me on Amazing Race. I can do it in any country, at any. And then I go, what about at night versus during the day? What about in snow, all you Alabamas? Could y'all come up to New York or Ohio and be like, yes, I got this? What if you were in France and you were on the other side of the road and the language wasn't your language? You see what I mean? Like you're the same person, but you needed more or less support, not because of a label that I put on you, but because of the circumstances, from both internal, my preference, to external, it's snowing. And that for me is when Daryl says all can achieve with support, I mean all of us, and all of us do need support. And when we try to retrofit a lesson for someone who we've labeled as needing support, we've narrowed the possibilities of how we can all benefit. So that was just a little.
Cool. Yeah, I love when you think about driving and how it really impacts every single one of those things. It's like, I would need support there. Oh, forget it. If you're talking about stick shift, I'm out, right? But it doesn't mean I am different. It means the support needs are different because the situation is different. And our goal is to help school systems become inclusive all day, every day, everywhere, every day. So we no longer have to draw lines, or any lines that have to be drawn are drawn just to create larger circles around everybody to support all kids. Kristie, what do you think? Should we just quickly talk about the why?
Yeah, might as well. I know why you're saying quickly, so yeah, but go ahead, because I think it's important, because it's something we as advocates have to come back to all the time.
Yeah, so believe it or not, every school system that we work with, we have to return to the why of inclusion every single time we talk with them. Some people are motivated because of personal stories. So they'll hear a story and they'll be like, yeah, this is the right thing. Or they've got a kid themselves with a disability, or a nephew or a niece that identifies as LGBTQ, and they're figuring out, oh yeah, that's really important for me to rethink that. Or the law. So Kristie, I don't know if we put it on their dashboard to begin with, but part of me wonders, this might be a great place to put Pat Rado's video.
Sure, I can do that. I'll do that.
So Kristie is kind of like she's working on the dashboard all the time, and she'll keep adding to it. We're going to put a video on your dashboard that's all about the legal aspects of inclusive education. And it will give you everything you need to know about where it all falls in the law.
That's a really good point, Julie. Sorry, because he talks about the myths, and he's a parent of a son with Down syndrome and a special ed lawyer. So I think it'll be really, really good for this group. So I'm glad you thought of that.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because some of you are just here for the law, and today we're not going to go deep and wide into the law, although we'd love to. We just want to make sure we get all these pieces to you. Some people make changes because of the research. I'm not going to lie, I think often Kristie and I are invited into school systems because when you include children, they do better on all academic tasks, and we start to close that gap that exists. We don't care how we're invited or why, as long as students get access to general education, content, curriculum, and peers.
Mm.
And a lot of people, probably every single one of you is like, because it's the right thing to do. Because like, why wouldn't you include? And so, of course, and that's why a lot of people come to this work. We're pretty excited to hear today that there are administrators with us today, because one of the things we want you to think about is your personal why, and practice telling others, what's your why? Why are we headed to this work? Anything else you would say, Kristie, about this? Or are you
I'll just
over there?
circle back to how you started it. Don't feel frustrated when you have to keep coming back to it, and or different players will need different whys at different times. So you need to understand all of these whys, understand what keeps you motivated, and then understand each human you interface with may need to know the different whys or combination.
Great. So Jenny's asking a question about the ADA. And what I want you to know is the most powerful place to point to the law around inclusive education comes under IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, under least restrictive environment. That's where we often point, because all school systems, even Alabama, every state in the country uses this federal law, and the federal law is pretty powerful. But you're definitely going to want to watch the myths around the top 10 myths around inclusive education. That's just going to be placed on your dashboard, and you're going to watch it at a different time than today. Why I love to say disability is diversity is because it is. The other reason I love to say disability is diversity is because we recognize if you take any other group of humans and say, oh, it's totally okay to segregate or separate that human because of this difference, call it race, call it gender, call it LGBTQ status, call it anything, we would be pretty uncomfortable with the concept or the construct. However, disability is the last category of human being that people still think it's absolutely okay to segregate by. And I really want you to think about that. Yes, least restrictive environment. So when we talk about inclusion, we are talking about disability and ability, because people with disabilities as labels are the least likely to be included in school settings and systems. But what we want you to look at and notice is that's only one piece of a human being. So when we say ability, where is it on here? I can't even see it. Oh, ability, it's light purple here. When we say ability, it's one attribute of a human being. And notice all the other attributes of a human being. Kristie, what do you want to say about this wheel of identities as by way of today's work?
I guess I'll just say that in our definition, and some people put it in the chat, they resonated with that the student comes to us as whole. And this identity wheel could have many other layers. We've got 2 circles, kind of a really core part of who our identity is, and then even more tangential, but still a part of our identity, from how we communicate to our choice about vaccines, to be honest. All of that is part of our identities. And that's part of our wholeness. And so even though Julie and I hang out, like she said, in that area of identity of ability, we can't avoid talking about and understanding the implications of the overlap, or what many will call the intersection, but it's really much more than intersection. It's because they're all layered and mushed together into one human that's really diverse.
And really whole to begin with.
And really whole.
And so even when you look at the video we just saw about line makers, what we've been doing for too long is saying ability is the whole of the human. And this kid has Down syndrome, therefore they need to go here, right? And what we're saying is, no. Ability is one little aspect of this human being that's very complex. And we need to make sure every human being is welcome and part of our school system in real ways all day, every day. Okay. I wish we can do a whole like week on this, but we're just going to mention it and talk about this. Kristie, shall we talk about power and privilege or move on more to how? We have
Let's at least
30.
yeah, it's hard for us because we know we're not doing justice to it.
Right.
But let's go ahead and just say that a couple colleagues already mentioned it as well, the privilege of being able to speak verbally and in English, I would add, in the United States. This wheel that has been adapted by the work of others is a place that you might spend some time as a district or a group or even a team between families and teachers to understand where the power is. So the power is at the center of this circle with all of these different identities. And depending on your student, let's say that your student, we'll just use Pat Radel, the special ed lawyer that we were talking about. His son has Down syndrome. He is white. He is now, I was trying to go through here. I don't know what his sexual orientation and or identity is, so I can't really do a good job, but mostly he's English. He does have citizenship. He is white. What else would you say, Julie, where he has some privilege?
He has two parents that are lawyers.
Two parents that are lawyers.
privilege.
You see what I mean? So even though he has been marginalized because of his ability, there are many places in his wholeness that he has power. And so it's just thinking about for each student, where do they need additional work from us to dismantle any ism, not just around ableism, but also oftentimes because of racism is always at play, and then maybe even sexism and, okay? So this is, we don't mean to gloss over it as if it's not important. It's just something that's oftentimes part of our own learning to understand the many ways a particular student with a label might be marginalized by our educational system in multiple ways, seen and unseen, spoken and unspoken, even by our criteria for becoming eligible for services can create another place where we marginalize a student.
I might even say does create.
Yeah, it does.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
right?
Julia.
Yeah,
Yep.
does create a way to marginalize students. So we could go on and on, just look at the IQ measure itself, just look at any one of these pieces. We know that it has all sorts of really problematic or is problematic as a whole. And so all this to be said, our goal in school systems is to make sure that every student has more than a seat at the table, instead has access to general curriculum, is involved in general curriculum, and can make progress in the general curriculum. All of those things. And also have access to all students in the school setting. Oh, Kristie, I don't know. I'm just
I know, keep going. It's all right.
right.
I know.
Okay,
I know.
well-
It's on their dashboard.
Okay. This is something you probably don't know. It's a little known secret, so I'm going to share it. There's something called the Ronker portability test. And what the Ronker portability test, it's an old court case, a Sixth Circuit court case in 1983. And it says this: if services can be brought to the child, they should be, instead of bringing the child to the services. So this is a case against pull out instruction. It says that our job as educators is to make sure that if your child is a fourth grader, they stay in the fourth grade classroom all day with all the kids who do and do not have disabilities. And our job is to bring services and supports right to the student, right where they are. Not it's 10 o'clock, it's time for speech and language. It's 11 o'clock, it's time to go to OT. It's different than that. It's everybody all together all the time with powerful differentiation. And as Kristie said, with the just right supports at just the right time. All right, Kristie, I know.
Okay.
All right, so let's go to the how, because we want to make sure that you've got this. And Kristie's reminding you that on your dashboard, these PowerPoint slides are there so you can read through them. They're all headed really well so you'll understand what we're talking about. But let's talk about the how. How do we do this? The first rule is we have to all see this as our role. Parents, we have to work really hard, unfortunately, to advocate for this right now. School staff, we have to make sure that inclusive education is available for all students all the time. And how we do that is first trying on what we're going to call different lenses. And when Kristie was showing you the dashboard today, she showed you the two different lenses that we're going to talk about. And someone said, yeah, it's kind of like the social model of disability, and it's true. When you have such widespread segregation of kids with disabilities, what we know to be true is the way we're thinking about disabilities is flawed. And the lens we use, the way we look, the way we think about disability is really impacting the ways that we're supporting teaching and giving access to all students. So we're going to show you the two lenses by way of Winnie the Pooh characters. Put yes in the chat if you're fairly familiar with Winnie the Pooh, or you know at least a couple of these characters. Put yes in the chat if you're fairly familiar with these characters. Put no if you've never heard of them before in your life, because that'll help me know.
Veronica.
She is married to one. I mean, okay, good. So it looks like we've got a pretty good sense. Okay. When I look at these characters, you can see that Kristie and I have put definitions of like Winnie the Pooh as happy, pleasure seeker, relaxed. Eeyore is loyal, lovable, and an obstacle finder. Piglet is sensitive, empathetic, and kind. Tigger is energetic, quick, and fun. Owl is wise, gives advice, is a philosopher. And then Rabbit is organized, detailed, rule follower. First question, when you look at the blue descriptors or the white descriptors in the blue boxes, are they positive, negative, or neutral? Are these descriptors about these characters positive, negative, or neutral?
Yeah,
Yeah.
some people are doing thumbs up, Julie. So generally speaking, positive.
Yeah, positive, positive, positive. I would say so too. Great. For fun, if you had to identify with one of these characters today, which really fits you? Today, I'm 100% Tigger, Kristie, nothing else. What about you?
Today, I'm a mixture of Eeyore and Rabbit, mostly because of the obstacle finder and rule follower part.
Go ahead and put in the chat. This is like one of those BuzzFeed quizzes. It's very scientific. But
And
what
some people can combine them. You know,
Yeah.
you can make a name that, like a Brangelina.
Okay, good.
So I have some fellow friends, some fellow rabbits there.
Yeah,
You've got some fellow Tiggers.
Yeah, good. Okay. Next, I'm going to change the lens. I'm going to change the lens that we're going to look at these same characters through, from a positive lens to, sorry, everybody, get ready, a negative lens.
How many of you are like, oh, darn, never mind. I am
Get it.
not Eeyore. Certainly not Rabbit. Come on now.
Yeah, some people, Veronica's like, yep, still the same, for
Yeah,
sure.
Tiggers are always, yep, totally still.
I got to think of, I got to think of a better, super negative words about Tigger. Okay, but what I notice, let me ask you this. What do you notice when you change the lens? Kristie, what do you notice? You notice people are less excited to be those characters.
Yeah, I think it's a mix. I think some people are really sure with themselves over the years and they're like, yep, that's me. They embrace it. Me, I start to feel a little embarrassed and a little bit like, now you guys know that I've got flaws.
Ah, yes. Sorry, I was
You're
trying to
okay.
respond. pessimist, someone said, what does pessimist mean? Pessimist means it's like you see the world through a negative lens or through
like nothing's going to work out. Everybody's out to get me. This will never work. We're going to fail. We can never do inclusion. There's never enough money. There are not enough subs. Does that make sense? I know it because I am it.
Yeah, glass half empty. Yeah, that's right. Worst case scenario. Good, Jasmine. And again, just thank you for asking. Ask any questions that you have. So what we have to do in education is stop seeing people with disabilities as humans with deficits that need to be fixed. We have to change. And in school systems, we often take it one step even further, from positive to negative, from negative to medicalizing difference.
Right.
We go all the way to this, medicalizing difference. So we're like, that looks like obsessive compulsive disorder. That's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That's definitely an anxiety disorder. You're more than 2 standard deviations below the norm on this subtest. And we go ahead and label humans. And then they carry those labels. Those labels precede them. And those labels define them through many, many people's eyes. Yes. And so what we want to ask you to think about or to work towards is the shift from the medical lens. The first how is we have to think completely differently about humans with disabilities. Ooh, Kristie, can you say that out loud, what you just put in the chat?
The number one thing Julie taught me is that I need to think about, talk about, and write about students in the most positive ways. And it's not that I'm ignoring any of the things that they need support around, but it's changing my lens so that I'm working from an equity lens. So as Julie describes this, just know that from how I write a present level to how I might do a parent-teacher conference, to how I might talk to a colleague about a student in the hallway, to how I go to sleep at night with a student who's weighing on my heart. My challenge to myself is to think about, talk about, and write about that student in the most positive ways from an equity lens, every day in every way.
And so we've got this old-fashioned medical model, past way of thinking, and unfortunately this still exists all over, but I like to call it like it's from the past, where people assume the disability resides within the person. It's a pathology or impairment. We have to fix it or remediate it. Labels are deficits. The label is the problem, and we ignore systemic inequities. Okay, like this. That kid doesn't read on grade level. And so because they can't read on grade level, we have to pull them out and teach them to read over here. And we're going to fix them. And then we're going to return them when they're ready to read on grade level. Except the truth is, when you pull a kid out and work over there, they're never ready to read on grade level because we give them different and less instruction. And so that's an old-fashioned way of thinking. And it's still pervasive. Yes, Sonia, a child will raise to the adult's lowest expectation. This stuff is about expectation. It's about what kids get access to. It's about systems. It's about structures. It's about everything. We have to move to an equity lens. Kristie, do you want to explain equity lens?
So you can follow these bullets from what Julie said to where we're transitioning or moving. And again, any given age or grade or district or region or county, can be in a different place, but this is the challenge for all of us. So we want to move to where we see disability as a socially constructed identity, just like race is socially constructed. Does it have humongous implications on the health and well-being of humans? Yes. It's also made up by humans. That's what socially constructed means. We made it up. There's nothing really real there. Let's focus on the societal barriers that disable people. Let's aim to provide the just rights. I like to think of Goldilocks and the 3 bears here, that it's not a one size fits all, but we do the just right for this learner and the just right for that learner and the just right when you're a learner over here. Disability is a natural difference in humans. Focus on the systems as the problem, not the disability or certainly the person. And then this is where the hard work starts to come in, is to name and address systemic inequities. So we say, hey, testing kids to see if they're eligible for special education is leading to systemic inequities because it's based upon a normal curve where normal is a myth. There is no normal population. And it is either increasing or decreasing access to the right of that human based upon a socially constructed scale. We start to go, wow, maybe it's our eligibility criteria that's a problem, not the kid. So these are the things that are big and require all of our efforts every day.
I'm going to use an example that I think is really easy to understand. I have a child who is now he's at Brown University, so he's a college student, and he's legally blind. My son, Sam, that you saw in those pictures earlier, he's legally blind, okay? And so some of you would be like, obviously, that's a disability that resides in Sam, right? His eyes don't see like most people's. And it's like, yes, and what I mean is, yeah, for sure, he sees differently than most people. And if his teachers have auditory access, he can listen to everything, or an iPad that he can blow stuff up, he basically has no barriers to learning. When I'm in a classroom with someone who has ADHD, as long as I'm able to stand or sit or walk or move, I'm a lot more comfortable and able to learn. By removing that sit still and look at the front barrier, I can be successful. If we remove, right? So what you need to hear is disability exists in certain ways, and it's not what we think it is. It's just a call for us to make new changes to our systems, to our structures, and more importantly, to our schools, so that all kids can participate and be successful.
I can hear you thinking all the way over here in Ohio, Julie.
So here's Sam as a kid, and I'm going to give an example of, he's little here. And one day he comes home from school and he's like, Mom, I can't find my friends on the playground because all the kids go out to recess and I can't identify visually who's in our class. And so I need some support. I'm so excited because Sam, my son, is coming to me to ask for my help. And I'm sure it's because
who's not really helpful.
Right. I'm sure it's because he knows that I have great ideas. So I say, yes, Sam, and I get out some chart paper and markers. I'm like, I'm ready to support you. And then he's like, oh my gosh, forget it, Mom. I'm going to handle this myself. I'm devastated. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I got this. Don't worry. Just please put that away. All right. So the next night I get a phone call from a second grade teacher. Her name is Mrs. Procopio. And she goes, Julie, you won't believe what Sam did today. I said, what? He walks into class and he says to me as he walks in, Mrs. Procopio, can I have 5 minutes on the morning meeting agenda? Because I want to do some brainstorming with the class. So what do you notice about Mrs. Procopio already from this story? Number one, she calls parents to tell them funny stories about their kid. That's kind of awesome. What else do you notice about Mrs. Procopio from this story so far?
She had morning meetings with her class?
Yes, she has morning meetings. So she has a system for kids to have input in their education. She has an agenda. She's very organized. She listens. She cares. Sam would rather talk to his second grade teacher than his own mother about this big challenge. Those are things that I know about Mrs. Procopio already. Beautiful. So what happens is Sam says to the class, hey, everybody, at recess, I can't find my friends. And so I wonder if you have solutions. Apparently every second grader had their hand up with an idea. The first idea was this. We need those day glow hats that runners wear so you can tell who's in our class and who's not. So Mrs. Procopio writes day glow hats, one idea. Second idea is we need those bright orange pennies from gym class, and we'll put them over our jackets, and then Sam will know who's in our class and he can get help wherever he needs it. Great, pennies from gym class. Third idea is we just need walkie-talkies. She writes walkie-talkies down. Now, if you were to guess out of those 3 options, which one do you think, when they voted, which one do you think won? Hats, pennies, walkie-talkies. What do you think?
Walkie-talkie.
Okay, walkie-talkies. I love that you're, Tamika, thank you. Yes, it was a landslide victory. Walkie-talkies won. 90% of the people voted for walkie-talkies. Okay, so I'm there just about 2 weeks later, and I don't understand what they're going to do with walkie-talkies, but whatever. And I see Sam standing on the playground by himself, and I thought, yep, that's because he didn't brainstorm with me, and I would have had better ideas. But instead, I hear him go like this: I'm looking for Baden, over and out. And then I hear, Baden's been located. He's on the slide, good buddy. And then Sam runs to the slide, finds Baden, and plays. Okay. And for me, it's like I have so many I have so many thoughts about this story. The first thought is kids know how to do inclusion better than adults. They know how to do it. Just ask second graders, they can solve these problems. The second is these second graders knew to use his strengths. So they knew right away, they didn't go, oh, what is Sam's visual acuity? How many standard deviations below the norm is he on this subtest? We're gonna have to do, right, none of that. They were like, what can he do? Oh, great. He can identify bright colors from afar, and he can hear really well. And then they had ideas. As simple as it sounds, when we focus on kids' strengths instead of their deficits, we have answers to how to include kids by just starting with and staying with strengths, right? Anybody else can share any other thoughts you're having about that story? A lot of people are putting awesome story. Thank you. For me, it's pretty profound in that it's not as difficult as it seems, and kids know better than us. All you got to do is explain the challenge and they're in. All right, Kristie, let's give them 100 ways to differentiate. What do you think about that?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Or what? You tell me.
Yes. No, I was going to say, let's just tell them what's on their dashboard. I'll show you what I mean, and then we'll get to the 100 ways. So
okay.
Go ahead. No. Where you were going, Julie.
Okay.
I'm just going to tell you guys what is a tip and where to find it. And then we're going to go into one last tip in detail, because I think we have less than 10 minutes. Okay. Yes. Nancy, you correct us if we're wrong. So Because of Oliver is the second part in that PBS series. It's on your dashboard, and it is another 5-6 minutes that shows how teachers redesigned a lesson because of a kid named Oliver and how everyone benefited. So that might be something you want to see, is how teachers rethought a lesson to ensure all could access. So that might be one thing on your to-do list, is watch Because of Oliver. Next slide, Julie. This one is super powerful. Julie and I did a separate recording that's just about this prompting ladder, and it's on your dashboard. So not only is the download, but there's a whole training video that you can use and reuse. And Julie will tell you the magic in 30 seconds about how to use this, and know there's a full training video on your dashboard. But Julie, how do I use it if I want to even know I want it?
Okay. So this is really about how we provide support to humans who have support needs. And what we ask people to do is approach the ladder as if you're afraid of heights, and only go as high as you have to and down as quickly as you can. So as parents, as educators, we are often asking them to look for the just right supports instead of over supporting or under supporting a kid. You want to get to the just right supports and go back to as natural the supports as possible. Okay, good.
Make sense?
Yep.
I was-
Did I do
okay,
it in 30?
Then, what's the next one, Julie? Okay.
Zigzag.
Also, on the dashboard, this is another strategy about how you give just right supports. How do you approach, when you have multiple students or your educator says, your kid's only one of 32. What do you want me to do? How do you create the right amount for the right kids and or teach them to do the just right supports they need? And we call it the zigzag process. There's a whole podcast and a download. So if you're like, I'm curious how on the fly, after a lesson is already in place, or maybe the teacher is unwilling to change their lesson, how could I teach my student, my child, to be able to give themselves the just right supports, or easily have a teacher give just right supports without changing the core of the lesson? It's called a zigzag process.
And I'm just going to pick one to demonstrate, because this one will make perfect sense. The human brain loves the pink side, struggles more with the purple side. And so just if you're doing a math worksheet with these complex math problems, you simply simplify it. It's going from complex to simple, from abstract to concrete, from specific to global, from unfamiliar to familiar. So you're adding in things that really offer support for the human brain, whether a kid does or does not have a disability. And for our last tool today, we told you you'd get 3 big ideas about how to do this work. Now you're going to get 100 more. So get ready. We're going to show you 100 ways to adapt anything. And I'm going to stop sharing for a second to go grab this handout.
I'll do it for you, Jill. Here you go.
Oh, you're the best. Okay. I'm just going to ask you to trust us that we've got definitions at the top that may be important to you. But we want you to start with this blue foundational questions.
Oh, sorry, Jill.
And that's okay. The blue foundational questions is anytime you have to make a change for a specific kid, you think to yourself, these questions. How do we increase their participation? What are the just right supports? What are the students' strengths, gifts, and abilities? Just like Sam, we had to start with his strengths in order to figure out how we can find his friends on the playground. You had to start with those strengths. But Kristie, explain how it's laid out, how there are 100 and what they are.
Okay, so and Jill, you decide where you want me to land. There are 10 types of column accommodations, modifications, or adaptations. 10 ways to anticipate what a student might need. And then each of them has 10 ideas. So if you want some ways to support the student using the environment, here are 10 ways. If you want to use peer supports, here are 10 ways. If you want to do pacing supports, I bet Julie'd like to stay here. Let's do that one, Joel. There are 10 ways. So there are 10 categories with 10 ideas each, making 100 ways to anticipate or provide just right supports.
So instead of thinking about pacing as, oh, this kid is so low, we're gonna have to go super slow for them. Okay, the truth is you have a wide range of pace for any kid on any given day, for any topic, for any assignment, for anything. And we have to stop saying it's these kids with disabilities that are really slowing us down here, because there are kids with labels that are going faster than everyone else too. So instead, what we want to think about is how do we build in pacing supports all day long? Meaning, for example, let's say you have centers or stations. You can say to kids, hey, you can pick 2 stations to go to today. So you can go 1, 2, or you can go to 5 stations today during that same amount of time. If it were Kristie, she'd usually pick 1 station because she loves deep learning. If it were Julie, I'd want to stop by all 5 stations and learn what I could. Okay. All humans have preferences, and we use preferences as a way to design our instruction.
Okay, so it just keeps going and going, and you can pick any of the 10 headings: social supports, self-management supports, human supports, and there'll be 10 ideas to prompt you through to have a conversation. And some of them you might need to have a conversation about what would that mean in terms of grading and assessment, where we might not feel like there is a choice. So that is 100 ways to adapt anything.
So we know that we are out of time, and we are sorry that we spoke so quickly today, but it's like we wanted to get everything in. So our closing ask for you, or request from you, is to end tonight by putting, everybody, if you can, put in the chat one word that comes to mind when you think of our time together today. So one word that comes to mind when you think of our time together today. Thank you, Daryl. Oh,
Circle.
Melissa, yes. Good.
And as folks are typing their one word, if our hosts need to say anything logistically or about next steps or anything like that, it's great.
Infinity, Jenny Lux. Thank you. That's my favorite word.
Definitely.
It is possible. Thanks,
Nancy, if you
everyone.
need a replacement word, it's called tinagona. It's a word from my friend Terai Trent from Zimbabwe, and it means it is achievable or it is possible. It's tinagona. That way you get one word. Yeah, it's a
Yes.
beautiful word.
Can you spell that for us?
Sure.
She'll put it in the chat. There it is.
Tinagona. She says it better than I do, but that's from her native land in Zimbabwe.
It means it is achievable. Linda, is there anything else you need to say, or
Daryl?
Nancy, or
Yeah,
Daryl, or anyone?
Linda? Yeah.
Just thank you for a great afternoon session.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Yes. And thank you for the dashboard. That will be an awesome tool for all of us.
Yeah.
I did what Linda has said, so we thank you all. It adds to what we already have and enhance. I think we're going to be moving Alabama forward with this great information that you provided us. So we really do thank you all.
Our pleasure.
All right.
And thank you again. And we do have a break until 4 p.m. with our next speaker.
Yeah, good. Better go stand up, move around, take a bio break, y'all. We'll be here before you
Anything
know
you
it.
do fast.
Yeah, if anyone needs to reach us, you can reach us on our dashboard. But
Oh, yeah.
I'll also put down my email. Oh, Julie, you beat me to it. There you go. If there was a question or a resource or a link doesn't work, or you need something more going forward, who knows? I may move to Alabama someday, and I'll need real estate advice and where to get a good beer.
You'll need good friends.
I'll need
All
good
right.
friends.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, Dr.
Better
Debbie.
go be a Tigger and bounce.
That's right.
Yes.
That's cute. Okay. Bye, everyone.